Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is March 23rd, 2018. Greetings from downtown Denver, Colorado. For this week's interview, I returned to Austin, Texas via Skype for a conversation with Blake Pollard, a longtime digital publishing leader who is now working in the U.S. for Readly, a digital magazine subscription service based in Sweden.
Everyone for a long time has been trying to reinvent the magazine experience on digital, or even the newspaper experience on digital. I was one of those that came out and said, why?
Also this week, Amazon finished on top in two notable rankings and for the first time surpassed Alphabet to close trading as the second largest market-valued company in the world. News from the Netherlands means we may not be seeing a color Kindle screen anytime soon. And for the tech tip, I'll show you how you can get Alexa to do a second thing without mentioning her name again. The news this week contained at least two notable successes for Amazon. First, the business social media site LinkedIn on Wednesday, March 21st, announced that Amazon in 2018 is the most sought-after employer in the U.S. based on billions of actions taken by LinkedIn's more than 436 million professionals, more than 146 million of them in the U.S. Daniel Roth, editor-in-chief of LinkedIn, explained that the rankings look at four pillars: interest in the company, engagement with the company's employees, job demand, and employee retention. Microsoft, by the way, which owns LinkedIn, was not included in the rankings. Roth's profile of Amazon described the company as, quote, stubbornly frugal, and gave the example of many employees still using bare-bones desks made out of wooden doors. Though in an update, they can now be powered up. They can be standing desks made out of doors. Following Amazon in the listing at number 2 was Alphabet, whose largest division is named Google, and number 3, Facebook. That ranking might have been different if the results had been tallied post-Cambridge Analytica revelations on misuse of Facebook data. In fourth place is Salesforce, a cloud-based software giant, and number 5 is Tesla. And number 5 is Tesla, which has a carpool program allowing employees to drive Teslas to work and keep them on weekends, it said. Rounding out the top 10 in order are Apple, Comcast, NBC Universal, the Walt Disney Company, Oracle, and Netflix. LinkedIn's coverage of these rankings included a couple of intriguing short profiles of Amazon employees. One gave a peek into what's happening with an Echo device that I haven't heard much about since it was launched on an invitation-only basis nearly a year ago. It's the Echo Look, and here is the young woman who leads the Look's product management team.
I'm fascinated by the fashion space, so this has been a fun opportunity for me to explore an area outside what I've done before. We're asking people to flex outside their comfort zones. We're doing stuff at the absolute bleeding edge of technology, but we're also leveraging fashion expertise. So we have folks who are app developers here who are writing code for our next big features. Our QA team sits over here. These guys are troubleshooting something right now. They're the best dressed team in this building, I'll tell you that.
I enjoyed trying the Look. That was thanks to an invitation forwarded to me by Garrett Riley. I remember that the Look, you took pictures of wearing two shirts, and the Look identified through cloud-based information and others. I think some humans were involved. Which of the shirts looked better on me than the other? And Darlene agreed with the algorithm. So I haven't used it since, so I've reverted to my usually average ways of dressing unassisted by the Look. But it was fun to see. There was a whole team there. Obviously, the Look has been moving along quietly. I don't think it's out of invitation only yet, so it hasn't really come out as a major product that you can just buy. And it was fun to get a glimpse of what's happening there behind the scenes. The other person that was profiled had a little bit of mystery to it.
I can't show you where I work at Amazon, but I can show you what I work on. I build drones from the ground up. This is one of more than 12 configurations that we work on. I like the freedom behind aviation. I like to fly. I've always dreamed of being a pilot. I was in the military. I worked on helicopters. It's something I'm incredibly proud of. Being able to continue my love of aviation outside the military is an incredible benefit.
The second honor that came Amazon's way this week is a first-place finish in a Harris Corporate Reputation Survey of 25,800 customers. It's actually the third year in a row that Amazon took top honors, and the company has finished in the top 10 for the past 10 years. The Harris rankings break reputation down to 6 factors: workplace environment, social responsibility, emotional appeal, financial performance, vision and leadership, and products and services. The survey was conducted between December 11th of last year and January 12th. Amazon thanked customers for the results by taking 20% or more off selected Alexa-enabled devices, but the discounts, I think, just lasted a couple of days. I checked just today, Friday, and they don't appear to be in effect as of this afternoon. On Tuesday, Amazon's market share rose enough to, for the first time, pass that of Alphabet, making Amazon the second largest company in the world, surpassed only by Apple. The Tuesday surge put Amazon's stock market value at $768 billion. Alphabet was $761 billion, and Apple still was in the lead at $889 billion. One of them's probably going to get to $1 trillion in market value before not too long. Jeff Bezos, meanwhile, is receiving generally favorable coverage, it seems, these days, including a photo-laden piece in the New York Times about Mars, his annual celebrity geek fest in Palm Springs, California. The image I loved most showed the Amazon CEO as he walked a yellow robot dog named Spot Meanie is his name. For the first time, a few reporters were invited to the event, which had been largely secret in past years. Guests were treated to free lodging and food, including crab legs at breakfast. The Times staffer, Jack Nicas, virtuously noted that his paper paid for his expenses and that he did not avail himself of the offer to keep the Echo that was playing bossa nova in his room when he arrived. Noted. The last item I want to tell you about in news this week is a scoop by Michael Kozlowski at goodeReader.com reporting that Amazon has closed its LiquiVista offices in the Netherlands. That was the company that it acquired a number of years ago. It was working on an e-ink-like screen that could show color, so the move brings to an end, apparently, the hopes that a color Kindle might be in the works. I suppose it could be by some other route, but LiquiVista seemed to be the main one evident until now, and it's being closed down. Kozlowski reported on March 15th that Amazon closed LiquiVista because they were not able to apply it to any of their existing hardware like Kindle e-readers and Fire tablets. That does solve one problem that I saw coming, which was if they did use LiquiVista technology on a Kindle, the problem was, yes, it was going to have color, but it was going to be so fast that you could play videos on an e-ink Kindle, or what, I don't know if it would even be called an e-ink Kindle at that point. It would be called a LiquiVista Kindle. And there goes the ability to say that the Kindle is dedicated for reading and it won't distract you with watching YouTube videos or Twitter. So that problem looks like it might have been eliminated, and I suspect that we're going to be looking at black and white Kindle screens for quite a while, maybe sharper, maybe faster, and maybe there would be some way to have some color but not have it turned into a screen that is just like an iPad or a Fire or something else. There were some other articles of note. I'll put links to them in the show notes. Bloomberg had a long piece, how Amazon became competitors' nightmare. And also there's been some information that I think had leaked out about how Amazon TV has been successful in building Prime memberships, even though Netflix is still ahead in the number of members and developing original TV. An item that I held over from last week that I saw when I was in Austin, there's a report that Amazon Books is coming to Denver. There's a nice mall south of here, Park Meadows Mall, and that's going to be a place that there will be a bookstore. It'll be quite a ways from the tattered cover bookstores that are in downtown, and those stores are going to do just fine, even with an Amazon bookstore south of town, I'm sure of that. Amazon came out with a gold Oasis while I was in Austin. I think it was $20 more. It wasn't completely extravagant, not like some of the Apple Watches, but it generated some negative publicity because what do you need a gold Oasis for? I don't know. If I was buying one now, I might just get one because I like having the top-of-the-line Oasis. Mine's not gold, but it's really a nice read. Darlene is reading mine because I got an advanced reader copy for the Elizabeth George mystery that we both wanted to read, and I could only put it on my Kindle. So I've been reading on my Fire tablet, and she's been reading the Elizabeth George book. I'll be glad to get my Kindle back when she's finished. She says the book is very good. And I agree, the title is The Punishment She Deserves. It is now available on Kindle from Viking. It was published on March 20th, and I'll have her on the show the week after next. I've got a couple of tech tips for you. First, Tom Semple wrote to me on March 12th. Today's update of the Kindle for iOS app 6.4.1 fixes speak screen compatibility. I can't claim it was a result of my report, but I'm glad it's fixed. Also, there is an improvement in the Alexa interface. It's called follow-up mode, and the way you can turn it on... That's not follow-up mode. That's Great Grandpa Skeleton's clock chiming 6 o'clock, which means I've got 30 minutes before I head off to hear a friend play music at the Mercury Cafe here in Denver. Follow-up mode, when you turn it on with the app on your phone, the Alexa app, it's just below wake word and just above language, and if you toggle it on, it means that when you give Alexa a command, at the end of her answer, she'll keep the blue light on. On the Echo Show, there's a blue light at the bottom of the screen. If you're talking to one of the other devices, it'll be the ring going around. And at that point, you will be able to ask another question without using the wake name, which I use as Alexa. I'll give you a little demonstration here. We'll turn her back on. Alexa, what's the weather today?
Right now in Denver, it's 61 degrees Fahrenheit with partly sunny skies. Tonight's forecast has just a few clouds in the sky, with a low of 36 degrees.
Tell me a joke.
What kind of medicine do witches use on their warts? I don't know, but it isn't working.
Alexa, what's my next event?
Here are the next 4 events. Today, at 7 p.m., there's Kelly at Mercury. Tomorrow...
Alexa, stop. So that's, I think that's handy. It's kind of unnatural to have to say her name every time you're going to have a question. If you've got 3, you have to turn follow-up mode on device by device. There isn't sort of a global setting that will switch it on for all of your devices if you have more than one. Blake Pollard has been working in digital publishing since well before the Kindle was introduced in 2008. For 9 years, he led a team at Libre Digital in Austin that helped media brands move their content to the largest digital newsstands in the world, including Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Noble, and Google. For the past 4 years, he has been at Readly, a digital magazine service based in Sweden that offers more than 2,500 titles from around the world. Blake's work is focused on developing the U.S. market for Readly. I connected with him on Wednesday, March 21st, and began by asking him to describe exactly what Readly does.
Readly is a digital reading service that provides customers with unlimited, or as some people say, all-you-can-read access to thousands of national and international digital magazines.
And how did it get started?
So Readly was started by an entrepreneur from Sweden that basically had a couple of startups in the gaming space. And he decided at one point, I think it was in 2013, why can't I read my favorite magazines from all over the world? Like I can listen to all my favorite music. Being in Sweden, Spotify was obviously huge. So he had dual citizenship in Sweden and the U.S. So he decided, I'm going to create this service where people can read digital magazines from all over the place and use a similar model to Spotify/Netflix. He basically used a lot of the same developers and created Readly, and I think they launched it in the spring of 2013 in Sweden.
Did he start right out with magazines in English as well as Swedish and other languages?
It started with Swedish magazines in those early days, but there was definitely a desire to move quickly into English magazines.
Then how did you get involved?
I have a long history of being involved with digital reading, let's say. And I have a long history in relationships with traditional news publishers, magazine publishers, even book publishers. When they first reached out to the U.S. and called a few publishers. They basically referenced me, those publishers did, and said, hey, if you want any chance of getting this thing going in the U.S., you should probably reach out to Blake, which was very flattering, and I appreciated that. And from the beginning, it was more or less talking to them about how I could help them with the current company I was at. And then ultimately, they made an offer to me probably within 6 months that I couldn't refuse, and got excited about helping them launch the service over in the U.S.
And when was that?
That would have been officially the fall of 2014 is when we launched it in the U.S. I joined in the spring and then built the team throughout the summer and built up the catalog in anticipation for that launch.
My introduction to it is the AT&T wireless service. They made it was a great deal because I got a year-long free subscription to what they call Readly Select. It actually ends in about 10 days. And that Select promotion, it had up to 4 magazines a month on up to 5 devices with it said over 1,000 U.S. and international publications, which is a lot less than what you've got now. But was it essentially a look at all of the publications that I had through that Readly Select, or just 1,000 of them? So
it was a private offer that we set up and created Readly Select with the idea of doing a variety of these types of offerings. And AT&T was the first, and they were a great partner to work with, I should say. The idea was to expose all the titles to people and then let them kind of pick and choose. And you've used it, so you can say you have to confirm your selection, but choose up to 4 titles, and you can read all the issues tied to those titles, because we do keep a pretty deep back catalog for as long as publishers have been sending us their content. So that was the idea, kind of a skinny version of Readly, if you will, to kind of get people introduced to it. And then it also fit well within the model that we had and the licensing agreements that we have with publishers. Can you say how many people signed up for that Readly Select offer through AT&T? So it's been going almost a year since they launched the offer last spring, as you noted. I can't give you an exact number. We typically don't do that, but I will say that it's hundreds of thousands. And any sense of, as the offer expires, how many people are converting to a full Readly subscription? Well, so most people are still enjoying that free access period that you referenced earlier. We've had a decent number that have already upgraded early because they wanted to read more. But we're going to be giving, which should be happening here shortly, we're going to be offering a pretty special deal for all of those select users to continue reading, and we're really centering it around the unlimited reading. When I switched to the regular Readly offer, $9.99 a month, how will that differ from the look that I've had using Readly Select? So the look and the feel is going to be really similar. The whole concept of having to select a title first to start to read it, that will go away. You're going to have complete unlimited access to read as much as you want. So that's really the only difference. A lot of the same functionality is there when you start talking about how things are categorized, how it makes recommendations, the search functions. It's just going to open up the entire catalog. I've noticed that with Scribd, which has kind of a competitor to Kindle Unlimited in books, I think they also have some magazines, they seem to struggle because of the voracious reader problem, especially in romance novels, and they actually backed off from the all-you-can-read for a while, and now they're back onto it. Have you had a similar challenge when you make something available to this? There's a certain small number of readers who use it so much that it kind of challenges the model? I would say that that's what makes Readly so valuable. The people that are paying for Readly, they are cost conscious, I mean, everybody is. If you just want to read a couple of magazines, Readly's probably not a great deal for you. If you've got specific categories that you really love, whether it's business, whether it's knitting, whether it's, whatever, and we've got a nice catalog, a nice number of titles there, then you're going to get your value out of that. So we have, on average, our users are spending hours reading on the app each month, and they're reading 10 plus titles on average each month. And that's not really even looking at if they're reading back issues too. of certain titles. So they are reading a lot, and that's a testament to the service. It's a testament to say there are people out there that want something like this. They still have their favorite magazines. They're probably still subscribing to those directly in print, but this just kind of adds to it, and it adds to the discovery. I was going to say, on a side note, I know the people at Scribd really well. I think it's a really interesting service, and I think it's encouraging they actually added news and magazine articles into the service kind of related to the books that you're reading, and it just kind of shows the relevancy and the importance of quality content.
How do you pay the magazines that are accessible through Readly?
So it's a pretty simple model. It's all based on usage. The more that a user would read a particular title, the more money that's going to go towards that title and to that publisher. The system that was built, if you remember, the guy who founded it had experience in online gaming. So you're talking about transactions every second, thousands and millions of them every second. So they kind of applied the same theory to tracking all of that usage when it came to reading these magazines. And the other cool thing is all of that tracking, all that data and analytics is available to the publishers in our backend system. And it's pretty fascinating. It's updated every day. You can see certain things happening that maybe a publisher might just assume this is going to be the most popular article. It might not end up that. Or we know that our demographic is this, and it's heavily skewed towards females, and males never read it. Well, sometimes it shows males do read this, and it'll change if you put certain things on the cover. So there's a lot of interesting information. So basically everything we track is available to the publishers, and then the system that tracks it is purely based on usage.
So that information that's sort of a secondary benefit of a publisher participating, because otherwise they don't get to see that granular kind of information about what readers are reading in a specific issue.
No, I think it's huge. I mean, the way that we paint it to publishers is there's no risk. It's so easy to get started. We're taking files that are already being produced. They don't have to create anything special. They get immediately exposed internationally, both in their current market and then up to, I think we're commercially available now in 50 different markets. And then there's amazing data and analytics behind it. We even take things further when users read consecutive new issues. They're going to get that person's information, at least their name and their physical address, so they can bounce that against their internal databases. So in terms of, almost lead gen, there's some of that to it as well. So there's a lot of different value points, but those are kind of the main ones that I would point out.
Lead gen is lead generation?
Exactly. So if you're going to get hundreds, if not thousands, of new users where you're going to get their information, you can take that and say, okay, let's look at my existing database of subscribers on my own, how many overlap, which there's not going to be very many. And then if you want to offer different communications to them, because as we know, magazine publishers are diversifying. They're doing more in video and audio. They've got shows that they're doing. So it allows them to expose themselves to even more audience.
If someone, say someone subscribes to Newsweek already and they can get Newsweek on Readly, and they sort of realize, gee, I'm getting Newsweek through Readly, maybe I can cancel my full Newsweek subscription, but they're not reading as much on Readly to generate the same amount of what a subscription would cost. Is that some exposure that some publishers would worry about?
I mean, I guess I've kind of, for over a decade, I've had this response to, digital reading, it's going to cannibalize my print. And this goes back to early days of working with newspaper publishers. And I've always thought it was silly. It's probably 1 or 2%. New platforms like this are trying to bring in net new readers, trying to expose you to people that wouldn't have otherwise. I'm sure there's some people that get on here and they see it and they love it, and maybe they do cancel a subscription or two to physical magazines or even digital, but it's just so small, and it's such a small percentage of people. I just don't think it plays much of a factor. Now, we're not trying to encourage that. And I think the other thing, particularly in the U.S., magazine publishers for years have so heavily discounted their subscriptions that once you factor in the price of, especially on the physical side, printing that magazine, delivering it, the cut that you're going to give the agent, the sub-agent, whatever else, it's hard to say what actually ultimately ends up in the magazine publisher's pocket on an issue-to-issue basis. Now, I'm not arguing that it's less than what we could offer, a reader that's reading their magazine. But it's not that much for a lot of them. Now, some are premiumly priced, so it's a little bit different scenario.
Some of them might have, I used to subscribe to the New Yorker, which is not on Readly, it's on Texture. But as an example, that interface was pretty nicely designed. So somebody who was, say, subscribing to Newsweek or one of your other magazines, as a digital subscription, they might be getting a more full-featured digital feed than is coming through Readly, and so it might make sense just to keep a few magazines subscribed to, plus the thousands that are available through Readly.
You hit on something that I've been passionate about for a long, long time, and this goes back to previous roles in working with, as I said earlier, publishers of all types. Everyone for a long time has been trying to reinvent the magazine experience on digital, or even the newspaper experience on digital. I was one of those that came out and said, why? What you need to be doing is expanding your brand. People know your brand. Don't think about shoehorning the magazine or newspaper into this new, whether it was a device, a screen type, a platform. You've got to sit there and think of, what do people really want on this platform? So if you're reading Newsweek on Readly and you like it, I hope you have the Newsweek app on your phone, which is going to have to be just constantly streaming information every day and probably has way more interactivity, video, audio, everything else. That's not the magazine anymore. Leave the magazine alone and concentrate on that. And I think if you fast forward to today, that's what most publishers are doing. But this goes back 10 plus years ago when some of these early conversations were starting, even back when it was just e-ink devices.
So the publishers saw an opportunity over time to present their brand in a fuller way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that you just have to sit there and say, we're a media company. We have a magazine. It's our cash cow. I mean, for a lot of people still understand and respect that. But we need to be transforming ourselves to what our consumers expect and what they need. And what you need on an iPhone through the Newsweek app or on their website is far different than the magazine itself. There's still plenty of people that want that packaged together. They don't want the bits and the bytes. They want everything packaged together in the magazine form. Even news magazines, and certainly newspapers, now more than ever, actually. But you don't have to just take this. It's almost like a square peg in a round hole.
When we were talking about the magazines getting paid by use, I was just down South by Southwest, and I went to probably 5 to 10 sessions on blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and this idea of flows of money over the internet and micropayments finally being sort of possible because of blockchain. Is that anything that's on your horizon when you think about a Readly type service where as I read an article, I could be money could be flowing from my Bitcoin or Ether account to the publisher, and the whole system is just a lot tighter and with fewer middlemen?
We haven't discussed that. I mean, when you're putting in your $10 a month, everything that you're doing, just like you said, is basically transacting against that $10. So the technology's there from that standpoint. Now, whether we accept, cryptocurrencies as a payment, that's a whole different discussion. Just getting PayPal up and running a few years ago was enough. And it certainly hasn't. It certainly hasn't been a demand. So far as I know.
Yeah, except among the crazy people that go to South by.
No, it's fun to talk about those things. And South by's, as you know, I live in Austin, so we actually like to get out of town when it comes here now. But it's fascinating to see some of the things that are going on in that space.
Well, now, the other fairly well-known magazine subscription service is Texture, which I've also tried. Very nice. Kind of some overlap with your magazines, some that they have only, some that you have only. How would you describe Texture to Readly from kind of a potential customer or reader point of view? Well,
so first things, I'm a fan of Texture. I've known them since it started as Next Issue in 2010. And when they launched in 2012. So was encouraged by the announcement last week that Apple was acquiring the service. I think that's wonderful. As for the differences, Texture is available in the U.S. and Canada. They kind of shifted the experience to be centered more around articles from the catalog of magazines that they're in. Of course, you can still read a digital edition of the magazine. There's a couple of formats that they have within the app. So those are some of the main differences. I think we're looking for a much broader appeal. It's obviously available in 50 different markets around the world. And we're kind of dedicated to that true magazine reading experience. Although, within the Readly app, you can go and you can read different articles. It's pretty seamless. We're not really trying to take the articles out at this point and make an alternative reading experience. So I think that's the biggest user experience. And then the other thing would just be they're just really isolated and super focused on the U.S. primarily.
Can you imagine any changes that Apple would make to texture as they integrate it into their whole iBooks platform?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. If I were them, if I may, I would absolutely figure out a way to cross-promote it and integrate it into iBooks. I think it makes a lot of sense. It was probably 8 years ago, sitting with Apple telling them the same thing, many, many years ago. So, you don't walk into very many bookstores and there's not periodicals available to purchase as well. So I would absolutely do that. I hope they do. And then I would look at Apple News and say, okay, let's offer something like this up as a premium, within Apple News. I think it makes a lot of sense. They're certainly cutting out some barriers in that people can use their iTunes, their credit cards to pay for the service, and the model works. For services like Readly and Texture before, that taking that 15 to 30% cut of that just kind of kills the whole model. So that certainly opens up the door for them. But I would do a lot of cross-promotion and integration with those two platforms, and I hope they do.
Both Readly and Texture, I'm glad, are available on the Fire tablet platform. There's apps for each. Do you think that Apple might put an end to that? There's, in competition with Amazon and possibly Google Play, that the only way that you'd be able to get Texture going forward would be the iOS or Apple devices?
I mean, I think they'd have to look at their volume there first. We don't break out Android, but we're so heavily skewed to iOS. I would venture a guess that Texture might even be more skewed. Although when they first launched, they were Android only years ago. So it might be a little bit different for them, but I would say it's probably 70-30, if not 80-20. So I don't know how to answer that. I mean, if I were them again, I would look at, if we do that, how many people is this affecting?
Yeah. Now, can you see how many people are using Readly on Fire tablets as opposed to other Android-based tablets?
I haven't seen that data in a long time. I just know the high-level percentages if you look at iOS versus Android. And we actually have a web-based app that, believe it or not, amazingly, gets 5+% usage overall.
Yeah, I was surprised because I've got a big monitor here that's attached to my MacBook, and when I was checking Readly yesterday, I pulled it up, and it was kind of surprising how nice it was to have that big a page. I remember thinking, oh, thank God, I don't have to read on my laptop or my computer anymore. I've got these tablets and phones, but it was sort of like going back and saying, well, this isn't so bad once in a while to pull this up on my big screen.
No, and that was purely in response to our users saying, hey, I'd love to still be able to read this on my computer. And I would venture a guess that there's not another service like Readly that offers that. So all the other ones are app-based, which is fine, and that's where the majority of the usage. But it's a nice to have. There's some slight limitations, but it's a nice thing to have.
Exactly. Can you say which magazine gets the most readership at this point in Readly?
Well, I know, obviously, I'm much closer to the U.S. titles, and it's probably not a huge surprise that titles like Playboy magazine get a lot of usage, and they're a lot of fun to work with. They actually create a PG-13 version just for us that we can put out there, which was really nice of them. But their volumes are through the roof. But it's all over the place. I mean, 50-50 is pretty much where we stand in terms of male-female users. So titles like Consumer Reports do really well. Us Weekly, Family Handyman, Macworld, Maxim. There's a lot that have a tremendous amount of volume, through the service, and that's both U.S. titles in the U.S. and U.S. titles outside of the U.S.
It's a eclectic mix. You've got Playboy, but you've also got Guideposts, the religious magazine, the Inquirer, and these are all that available on Readly, but not Texture. One I know from my time as a writer, Poets and Writers, it's a really well-respected kind of magazine for writers. Then there's a lot like Bow and Arrow, Practical Horseman. I could imagine sitting down when I want to let my mind just go to freewheel, say, well, I wonder what's in Practical Horseman this month, it's a dizzying array of possibilities that you put in front of people.
Well, I think it can be, but the way that it's organized is trying to really hone in. If you remember signing up, it kind of at the start asked you to choose some of your favorite magazines or that you would be interested in. And then you can kind of build your own wall, if you will. You can kind of deselect certain categories. You can select the countries that you want content to come from. You can favorite whatever titles you want. So you can really narrow that down. And what that's also doing is if we bring on another title that's within that same genre or category, it's going to recommend that to you as well. So that's kind of the interesting thing that's going on in the background. But you're right. Nobody cares about 2,500 titles. Nobody cares about 500. Nobody even cares about 50. They care, do you have 5 that interest me? And then maybe they're going to discover 5 more.
Yeah. Now, it looks like you are pretty close to the new Amazon bookstore that opened in Austin a couple of weeks ago. Have you had a chance to head over there and take a look at it?
I actually have. And
what did you think?
I thought it was really cool. It was very transactional.
What do you mean by that? That's an interesting word to use.
Well, so truth be told, I went in there with my wife, and she's a massive fan of Barnes & Noble. And we have kids, so she'll take them there as well. And that's the experience when you say a bookstore, that's the experience that she's expecting. And that just goes back over time. So we went in there. It was super convenient. I didn't think there wasn't really much discoverability in there. Sometimes you can just get lost in a bookstore and find different things. But for what I think it is, we might have to come up with a new name for it instead of just calling it a bookstore. They might have to come up with something more creative than that. It was super convenient, and ironically, the only thing that she bought was a home decor magazine. So it could be a great thing for magazine publishers.
Yeah, and some of those stores have magazines and some don't. I forgot to check, but there are magazines there at the Austin store?
Yeah, she actually bought a home decor magazine that wasn't available or it sold out at Barnes & Noble. So, those great ones that cost like $15 per issue.
Any chance of Readly giving me the opportunity to highlight something in an article I'm reading and then have it get kicked up to the cloud so that I could be sort of collating interesting ideas across the magazines that I'm reading on Readly? That'd be a pretty challenging task technically.
I mean, I don't think it would be that challenging. I mean, the development team who's based in Sweden, they're great. And if you know one thing about Swedish products is they're always well designed. So they definitely have that. But it really comes on what users are looking for. And we really haven't seen a huge demand. Now, that being said, you can bookmark any page and it'll store it as a bookmark. You can also share and save a page. So if you're reading an interesting article, a lot of times I'll actually share it with myself. Mm-hmm. But if I bookmark it, it's always in the app. And then I could share that page or that article, but it's going to send a page, and not where someone could read it, to their email. It's actually going to bring them in, and then they have to download the app and sign up, and then they can read it. So there's a lot of that already there. I don't know if highlighting something inside of that article would make that big of a benefit, since you can share the whole thing. And usually, there's certainly longer form articles, but generally speaking, you'd kind of rather share that article as opposed to just a small portion of the highlight.
And if I wanted to just send something to my own email, then I would have the ability to capture and plus, as you say, the bookmark. So a lot of that.
Yeah, you could do both.
Anything else?
Well, first of all, I'd like to tell anybody who listens, we did set up a page where they can go sign up for a 30-day free trial. It's just us.readly.com/Blake. So my name, Blake. So encourage anybody to go in there, try it out.
And the way that works, I tried that link, and someone that follows it, they'll enter their credit card information, but the first month will be free before the card starts being charged.
Absolutely, and then you can cancel at any time.
Yeah, that's a great. I appreciate getting that, and urge my listeners to try that out.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well test it out and see what you think, and I'm always open to feedback. So, but I think other things coming up is you referenced here in the U.S. The AT&T promo that started last spring, so a lot of that's going to be coming up. So we're going to be putting together a really great offer for all of those users. I should say this too to all your listeners: if they are on AT&T and they haven't signed up, the promotional offer is still there. A new promotion started in the fall and runs through the end of April, so you can still go sign up for Readly Select. You can get 12 months for free. I think you have to download their app, which is the AT&T Thanks app, to access the offer. So that's another way that you can gain access. We're probably going to be doing more promotions with them later in the year. I think we're cooking up an idea to make it even a more interesting offer when you start comparing unlimited reading to Select. So we're looking forward to that. And then I think as far as content goes, we're hoping to bring on, some of those publishers and titles that have not had a chance to join because of certain political things. We're hoping to bring those on here in the U.S. this year. And then abroad, just to point out, we've got television campaigns and billboards, radio, all running right now in the UK, in Germany, and in Sweden. That's certainly a little bit more expensive and more difficult to do over here. And that's in addition to all the digital stuff that we do from a marketing and advertising standpoint. If you go to YouTube and try to search for the British commercial, it's absolutely hilarious just because of the British humor. But that's exciting to see too.
I have been speaking with Blake Pollard, who markets the magazine subscription service Readly in the U.S. from his office in Austin, Texas. Thanks very much for talking with us, Blake.
Thank you, Lynn.
In content, there was some big news last week when Open Road announced that it had acquired the digital rights for U.S. ebooks for all of the novels by Graham Greene, one of my favorite writers. I read a lot of his books when I was younger. And it's all his iconic works, including The End of the Affair, The Quiet American, The Power and the Glory. Those are all available when it was announced on March 13th. And then the next several, which will be released on April 10th, will be The Heart of the Matter, Brighton Rock, and Travels with My Aunt. And then more than 15 additional titles will be published throughout the year. The press release that Open Road put out had a quote from John Fine, who was on the show a few weeks ago. John said, "With literally tens of millions of copies of his works sold in countless languages, Graham Greene is unquestionably one of the finest writers of his or any other generation, and we are thrilled to bring his remarkable oeuvre to readers in the United States for the first time digitally. Open Road's unrivaled ability to build and reach audiences in the digital marketplace uniquely positions us to strengthen and extend Greene's already extraordinary influence over readers old and new." After all 10 years on the Kindle, it's kind of exciting to see work by an author of this stature not yet available in the U.S. and now coming to the U.S. I'm sure they'll be priced reasonably by Open Road as opposed to what it would look like if they were coming out from one of the traditional publishers stuck in those high ebook prices. Congratulations to Open Road, John Fine. Good get. I had an interesting comment from a listener in response to the amount of time I spent talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency. Herbert Stender wrote, "Sorry, Len, but if you turn the podcast into one about cryptocurrency, you will lose this listener." I wrote back to Herbert thanking him for being that direct with me, giving me feedback. I don't think there's any risk that the rest of the episodes on the show are going to have a lot about cryptocurrency and blockchain. I probably got it out of my system there on that last show after all the sessions that I went to at South by learning about it. I did see something today that makes me think I need to buy some Bitcoin in addition to Ether. The founder of Twitter is predicting that in 10 years, Bitcoin will become the worldwide currency. So I may need to buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. I'm not going to put $9,000 out, and my Ether investment is down about $200 from what I paid for it at about $740. So I always appreciate your comments, especially if there's things you'd like me to cover more of or less of. That helps me to try to make sure that what we say here is of continuing interest to you. And you can send me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com. I've got 2 interviews next week. Otis Chandler, the co-founder and CEO of Goodreads, will join me, and then also Elizabeth George, the author of The Punishment She Deserves, which both Darlene and I are enjoying. I'm going to run the Otis Chandler interview in next week's show, and then we'll catch up with Elizabeth George for the week after. We will be heading back to Cambridge, Darlene and I and Claire, a week from today on Friday. Be out there for a couple of weeks. She's got a quilting workshop up in Maine, and I'll be doing involved with my family and the grandsons and my parents and my sister and everybody. So we'll have a couple of weeks there before we return to Denver, and then the seasonal migration back east will take place around June 1st. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.